Hello, and welcome to the Cancer Research Institute Cancer Immunotherapy and You Patient Education Webinar Series. I'm Dr. Arthur Brodsky, Associate Director of Scientific Content at the Cancer Research Institute, and during today's webinar, we'll be focusing on cancer immunotherapy, 2023 research, and a look ahead. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's expert. Dr. Nina Bhardwaj is Director of Immunotherapy, Medical Director of Vaccine and Cell Therapy Laboratory, and Co-Director of the Cancer Immunology Program at the Tisch Cancer Institute. Additionally, she is the Ward Coleman Chair in Cancer Research, as well as a Professor of Medicine and Urology at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Dr. Bhardwaj is also a former CRI-funded fellow and now an associate director of our Scientific Advisory Council. And she has made seminal contributions to human dendritic cell biology. In addition to being named one of Scientific American's top 50 researchers, she has also received the CRI Frederick W. Alt Award for new discoveries in immunology. Welcome, Dr. Bhardwaj, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm delighted to discuss the future of immunotherapy and cancer with you today.
So we just got off of a big meeting at AACR. What, in your opinion, have been the most important advances in cancer immunology and immunotherapy in 2023 so far?
I think from my own perspective, and I'm probably a bit biased in this respect, I think the exciting features of the AACR's meeting were centered around the use and discovery of novel cancer antigens and their incorporation into vaccines, and in particular vaccines in the prevention setting to prevent recurrence of cancer. I think that was one of the highlights. In addition to that, there was a lot of progress made on identifying new molecules that can be targeted and which are expressed by cancers and which can be combined with current therapies to further improve their ability to suppress cancer growth. By that, I mean, many of you out there are probably aware of the checkpoint therapies. These are antibodies that target inhibitory molecules on immune cells as well as on cancer cells, and which are designed to reawaken the immune system. And so some of these have been in the clinic for many years, and now we have a whole new set of such molecules that have been discovered and are now being targeted by either antibodies or small molecules that can be used in combination now to further advance the effectiveness of these earlier interventions. And then I would just like to add a couple of other advances, which include a major effort to deconvolute the tumor microenvironment. So when a tumor is growing, it's not just made up of tumor cells. It attracts immune cells. Some of these immune cells become dysregulated. They become partners to the tumor cells that can help tumor cells grow. In addition, there are other elements in the tumor microenvironment, such as the matrix, other cells like fibroblasts, that can also be usurped by the tumor to make the tumor grow better. And so we heard a lot about deconvoluting those tumor-associated partner cells and their products, and in terms of identifying particular molecules that we can now strategically target in the clinic to change what is a very bad tumor microenvironment into one that is much more receptive to immunotherapies.
Yeah, it is definitely exciting that we're starting to pair the general immunotherapies with an appreciation of that target the T cells with a greater appreciation of the complexity of the tumor microenvironment, and as well, breaking frontiers on the therapeutic angle. And so in that regard, what progress have we seen recently when it comes to the newer personalized immunotherapies like cell therapies and vaccines?
This is a very exciting area. And at this year's meeting, we heard the first results of a neoantigen vaccine in the setting of melanoma. And this vaccine is made from antigens we call neoantigens. So what is a neoantigen? So as you can imagine, is growing, they undergo a lot of mutations, and they do that because of inherent discrepancies in DNA replication, but also to escape the immune system. And so when that happens, these mutations result in the formation of new proteins that we call neoantigens because they're foreign to the immune system. And so one of the advantages of neoantigens is that because they are foreign to the immune system, they can be recognized as highly immunogenic products. And we can take advantage of that and formulate them into vaccine products. So we heard about this year the formulation of such personalized neoantigens, because remember, each tumor that a patient has is different from the next patient's tumor. And so each patient's tumor will have its own set of neoantigens. And in this one study, patients who had had a history of melanoma but were tumor-free were given their own personalized neoantigen vaccines in combination with a checkpoint inhibitor, pembrolizumab. It targets the inhibitory molecule PD-1 on T cells. One arm received that combination, the other arm received just the anti-PD-1. And the arm received the vaccine plus the anti-PD-1 had better recurrence-free survival rates that were statistically and clinically significant than the other arm that just got the anti-PD-1. So this is the first study of its kind, a randomized study. It was a small study, but nevertheless very exciting, and there will be a follow-up phase 3. So this has really put the concept of cancer vaccines on the map, and we're very hopeful that this will translate into long-term benefit in the larger trials that are upcoming. And so a number of these trials are going to be happening and are happening over the next year. So we'll hear about those soon. In addition to these neoantigens, we also have antigens that are shared, neoantigens that are shared across patients. And so those will be more off-the-shelf type vaccines, which are happening now, which I think will also be part of our future armamentarium against cancer. In terms of cell therapies, we have T-cell therapies that have been approved to treat malignancies like multiple myeloma, leukemias, and lymphomas that are approved therapies. The challenge really has been how to take T-cell therapies into solid tumors. And so we are seeing advances there as investigators are learning how to manipulate T-cells to make them attack the tumor cells better, to grow better, to be sustained better in the body through the expression of molecules that make them last longer and be more effective, and also to make them much more specific.
So, obviously these vaccines and these cell therapies were made possible by technological breakthroughs. So I kind of want to zoom out and hear, how are technologies helping to advance the field right now, both in terms of helping aid research discoveries, but also enhance existing treatments for patients in the clinic?
Yes, so it's a great question. And we want to try to prevent cancer from happening initially, and then when it does happen, to catch it early stages rather than more advanced stages. So there are currently efforts to try to screen patients much earlier through genetic testing and through testing blood, for example, to see whether or not there is evidence through spotting, let's say, DNA of tumor cells in the blood that might bring a patient to a doctor's attention much earlier. We've heard about things like Cologuard, which look for blood in the stool, for example, which is used to screen patients who are high risk of developing, let's say, cancer of the colon. But there are now efforts that are being applied to take patients' blood and screening the blood to look for early markers by screening DNA of cancer that might be not openly apparent, but nevertheless detectable through these kinds of screening procedures. And so there are major efforts now are bringing in a number of different kinds of tests to detect cancer early through the screening of blood samples. And along those lines, we have amazing new technologies that are looking at tumor compartments, but also things like urine, blood, through the spinal fluid, looking at bacteria in the tumor, bacteria in the gut, and so forth, to try to identify other features of the tumor that will give us more information about how to treat or tackle a tumor. So some of these tests include looking at a tumor three-dimensionally, by looking at cellular subtypes, by looking at the DNA and the RNA they make, and so getting a lot of information about the nature of the tumor itself, what cells are in the tumor, what is the tumor signaling to other cells, what products is the tumor making as a result of these very sophisticated tests that give us really a three-dimensional view of the tumor and helps us as immunologists to understand how the tumor is outwitting the immune system, but also then how we can really manipulate the immune system to treat the tumor. So some of these things are called Visium, Codex, single cell sequencing, whole exome sequencing, and these terms might be familiar to some of our audience.
That's great. And I think one of the most promising approaches now that we're employing is to not treat every cancer the same. Like you said, to try to understand the nature of each patient's unique tumor, which could not only, as you mentioned, help in diagnosis and help doctors determine what treatment might work best for them, figuring out how each patient's going to respond to a certain treatment. I know side effects can also be an issue with immunotherapy sometimes. Are these technologies and these approaches helping us to better understand, what causes side effects and who might be most likely to experience them?
Yes, I think your point about trying to understand or predict how patients might respond to treatment is a very important one. And so some of the testing that I mentioned will help us determine when to intervene early and with what, for example, or is there a greater likelihood of how a patient is going to respond and have a side effect of immunotherapy. So one example is patients receiving CAR T-cell therapies can develop a very highly inflammatory syndrome that is very serious, called cytokine release syndrome. And by following biomarkers in the blood, we can intervene very early and treat those patients with antibodies that neutralize factors that promote this inflammation, for example. So that's, I think, one situation where we're following a patient's blood, we can actually determine who might be at high risk. And then there are other biomarkers in the blood, for example, that help us predict who might develop graft versus host disease in a transplant setting. So I think it's a great time because by analyzing blood cells, blood analytes, protein and DNA, we can try to preempt the potential side effects of immunotherapies.
That's excellent to hear. Obviously, clinical trials are such an important part of the immunotherapy space to help answer these questions that remain unknown, as well as to test new treatments. So in terms of improving the efficiency of clinical trials, as well as efforts to improve accessibility of trials and improve healthcare equity, what initiatives pop out at you that patients should be aware of?
I think one of the most important that has come out is Cancer Moonshot initiative that was recently reignited by President Biden. We do know that depending upon the location and the site, that clinical trials can be closed off to many, many patients because of a number of different reasons. And so it's important to have healthcare equity and make trials available to everyone. So one is at the community level, ensuring that doctors in the community have access to trials or are aware of trials and can inform their own patients about what trials are accessible and available. in the community or close by in the community at bigger medical centers. And so I think the moonshot is trying to develop approaches to include people and patients into these clinical trials by making them more simpler, reducing exclusion criteria, making more clinical trials available through their clinical trial networks, which they support through the National Cancer Institute, and also doing extensive research on trying to understand why patients either perceive trials as barriers or that they are not being made aware of trials from which they could benefit from. And in addition, the Cancer Moonshot initiatives are trying to enhance diversity in terms of investigators who are coming in and working and establishing careers where they will be undertaking clinical trials. So these are major initiatives now that are designed to make clinical trials much more available to patients around the country. And of course, the telehealth initiatives are also helping us do that. And I expect that will also improve in terms of accessibility to patients.
Those initiatives sound very promising. As you mentioned, there's a number of reasons that are preventing certain groups from being able to take advantage of clinical trials. One of them, as you alluded to, is education, just simply making people aware of it. Or on the other hand, kind of maybe they are aware of them, but have misconceptions about what they're really about or how they can access them or whatnot. So I think getting the word out will definitely be an important first step to helping to solve some of these issues.
And I do think each medical center, in particular the cancer center, grant funded institutions, are making major efforts to be more inclusive of patients. These centers are, and in our case, it's Mount Sinai. We have a very diverse population locally. 40% of our trials are comprised of patients who represent the diversity of the population locally. So I think those of us who are clinicians and are in such communities also need to be better informed and more inclusive, make these trials aware to our patients.
It's definitely great to hear what these institutions are doing. But I know an issue for some people, who might not live near a major metropolitan city is they don't have access to these big institutions with all of these trials and efforts to help get them on. So I guess what kind of advice or what would you suggest for people who are constrained by geographical barriers?
So that's a great question. And I think obviously if you have access to a computer, you can look up this CRI's Clinical Finder and see what trials are available out there. And the Cancer Research Institute, the CRI, namely, does a great job of making that available to the community at large. It also updates the community on new approved drugs that are approved by the FDA, and it's probably the most up-to-date site that I'm aware of in terms of doing both. So I would urge patients to definitely investigate the CRI's site for accessibility to clinical trials.
Agreed. So finally, what are you most excited about for the field of cancer immunotherapy for the last half of 2023?
I'm excited about many things. So I'm very excited about the idea that prevention cancer vaccines can impact patients' lives and reduce recurrence or prevent cancers from developing. I think that in combination with the number of exciting immunotherapies already approved will be the wave of the future. I'm also very excited about cancer prevention approaches and helping individuals live lives where they can really prevent cancer from coming. And I think we're going to see in the next decade many new tests that are going to be able to screen patients early and also to identify patients at risk of developing cancers much more efficiently. And then I'm also very excited about what we call neoadjuvant therapies, where usually we were treating patients by either resecting the tumor and then giving chemotherapy or immunotherapy. And now the trend, at least for earlier stage cancers, we're seeing more and more, is to give immunotherapy up front, even before surgery, in the hope that we can shrink tumors or clear them early on. So those are just some of the things, but I think there's so many exciting things, and the next decade is going to be truly awesome.
I agree. And just to follow up on one of your points, Presumably the idea behind treating tumors earlier with immunotherapy is before the tumor has advanced and progressed and developed more tricks, the immune system, we would hope, has a better shot of eliminating the tumor at those early stages. Is that kind of the thinking?
Yeah, eliminating it early, especially when all the tumor hasn't become clever enough to outwit the immune system and bring in all these other factors that we discussed earlier that make it much harder for us to treat cancers. So I think early detection, early screening, early treatment, that's what we want to aim for in our patients. And also to have the whole population at large be much more aware that these initiatives are happening and that they should take advantage of them. And then, just say that the Cancer Research Institute has really been at the forefront for decades at trying to do this. So it's an exciting time for the field.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhardwaj, for sharing your expertise and insights with us. For more of our webinars and the additional resources we have for patients and caregivers as part of CRI's Answer to Cancer educational programs, we encourage you to check out our website at cancerresearch.org/patients. Here, you can read and watch stories shared by patients who have received immunotherapy treatment across a wide variety of cancer types. You can browse our entire library of past webinars and immunotherapy patient summit series featuring the world's leading immunotherapy experts like Dr. Bhardwaj. You can access information on other resources, including treatment, emotional support, and financial assistance, and get help locating an immunotherapy trial via our CRI Clinical Trial Finder. And thank all of you for your attention today. I hope you found today's webinar interesting and informative. And again, you can watch this and all of our other webinars on our website at cancerresearch.org/webinars. Finally, Dr. Bhardwaj, thank you so much again for helping to highlight the exciting future of the field, as well as the amazing work that you're doing to help patients. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and wishing our viewership all the very best and lots of good health.